This is Dave Monk of Prairie Monk, WEFT Champaign, 90.1 on your FM dial.
And Dave on the board.
And it's fundraising, and I thought it might be interesting to just go through an experiment, and this is what we were doing to try and get visuals out there and onto YouTube. One of our biggest problems is that people do not know about Prairie very well. They don't know about the elements like Heartland Pathways that are the resources that we use. And so I have with me Jason Liggett. Rue Song is on the video camera, and we're going to talk to you as a radio program, but you have to know that we are double dipping. We're adding visuals to this program. Jason will take the video and bring it up and then give it to us, and we'll drop visuals in at the appropriate places. We've tried to put visuals on by just holding them up in the studio. We've tried putting visuals on the studio computer, but it would seem that things like maps and charts sometimes need a little bit of artwork, and to drop them in later would be helpful. So I have Jason Liggett with me, and he's been leading the push here and putting things together, and very, very helpful. And so I thought from a fundraising point of view, you have to realize that WEFT has come into action 30 years ago as a community non-profit agency. It looked for a space downtown. I had a little bit to do with that, because at that time Market Street had 4 stores that were totally empty. So we were dealing with a dead central business district. Everyone had taken off for the mall, and the malls, because there were more than one. And so established here, low cost of buildings. At one stage I could have bought 2 buildings here for $45,000. And didn't, but we occupy and we own the building next door to WEFT. WEFT provides a range of music that you don't get on normal stations, and it provides community action, which is very helpful, and it's run on a shoestring. I've just been in here with Barbara Roberts, who has been looking for connections that didn't quite make it this morning. And so I want to check with Jason so that you know that we can experiment. We don't have at the moment a recording studio, a backup studio where we can prepare programs. It has been in action every once in a while, but often we have to cannibalize it to make the front studio work. So all these things need funding. It would be very nice to have our programs archived, as does WILL, so that you could go in and look for them later. But that costs money, and from the memory concerned. So let me get Jason to give you an idea of where he's coming from and how he sees this as helpful in a community sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work for the city of Urbana, so I'm an employee of the city, and more specifically I work at Urbana Public Television, which is the city of Urbana's public education and government access station. So at any given time on UPTV you might see an Urbana City Council meeting, you might see an Urbana School Board meeting, or we work with the high school for sports. We work with the journalism class at the high school and produce football broadcasts and soccer broadcasts. And then the public portion of that is similar to how WEFT operates. We have community producers and community volunteers that will come in, and they get
Rue is a community volunteer.
Yes, Rue is a community volunteer, and she's able to film this program and then put it on UPTV. So we don't necessarily, anyone can make a TV show about whatever they want. We have everything from now the Prairie Monk, Fridays at 1 p.m. that runs on UPTV. But then we also have local pro wrestling. We have cameras that people check out. We have the anti-war, anti-racism effort creates a show. There's all sorts of different programming on UPTV. Just, it's kind of a walking mirror of our community, if you will. Whatever's going on in the community, that's what we want on UPTV, which is truly what a community access station, whether it be radio or television, should be. It should be what the community is doing.
This goes back for a number of years when Urbana actually asked the television people to include a public access channel. And it was in an old IGA building across from the high school. And that ran for a number of years until I think one of the major companies, Time Warner or someone like that.
It was Time Warner at the time. In 1995, we started exploring the option, how public access and education and government access channels work is it's a franchise agreement between the cities and the cable company, whether that be Time Warner, Insight, or Comcast, or whatever you might have in your community, to where we negotiate to where they can use our public right-of-ways to string cable and fiber and anything else they might need. And in exchange, they give us a percentage of their, what we call the franchise fee or the PEG fee. So you're essentially, when you pay for your cable bill, if you're an Urbana resident, for the cable television portion, City of Urbana actually gets 2% of that to fund the public access, education access, and government access portion of that. So that's kind of how that works.
When
Time Warner.
Time Warner came in, they didn't want to do that. So this unit was disbanded and its equipment went to Parkland and other places. But I can remember it being very helpful. We were trying to promote a rail trail between the west side of Champaign County on the north. It would run through Fisher, Rantoul, Penfield, and into Armstrong and Vermilion County. And we took a lot of 16mm film there, and so no, it wasn't 16mm film, it was video, big old cameras. And but it was public access, and we had machinery that would put information onto the slides, and I can remember getting very upset because since it was public access and the video material belonged to the station, I'd left it there. But in a community setting, it's very vulnerable to people taking the video to use. So at that time, I had 6 hours of editing in on programs that got reused because someone needed a video. So I've learned to keep my public access stuff very close to my soul and not lose that. So we lost a lot of field work. And so community action resources are often pretty loose as a goose, and we tried to tighten that up, and so that's sort of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing you mentioned earlier in the program, that we don't necessarily have an archive. One nice thing that we're doing with this video that we're taking is after we add in the images and everything, it's going up on YouTube. So if people wanted to see it later, it would be accessible through YouTube.
Yes, and so that first of all gives me a little character. It takes you away from the imagination. As David said, who was it that was filling the lake with chocolate?
Now you've put me on the spot and I've completely blanked on the man's name.
Okay,
Stan Freberg.
Stan Freberg. The whole point was that with radio you have the liberty to be imaginative, and so people can put their own mind into it. It's a little bit like doing high contrast silk screen prints. You can put your own, that barn becomes your barn, or your fence line or something like that. But on the other hand, the video gives, you see me doing this with my finger and explaining the landscape going up and down, and so it brings a little character into the program. So that's first, but then you can drop visuals that are very essential to what we do, like maps and charts, and we've gone through 3 programs now, and the first one we had 2 guests, and so you got the character of the guests, and fairly straightforward. We have 1 camera. It can zoom in, it can pan, and it doesn't require a lot of editing.
No, it doesn't. Really, the only thing, we run the program from the beginning to the end, just as you would hear it on WEFT. We run that on UPTV, and it's on YouTube. The only thing we really add in is just the credits at the end and a small graphic at the bottom. And then, of course, you and Dave provide us with some images to throw in there, that we throw in those images.
Yes, so what we're doing now is you give us the program, and we time the insert, and then you insert them, and that's not an overburdening labor situation.
Not on me, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do, is simple and straightforward. But I want to say that experimentation wouldn't be possible if WEF wasn't here, and we need to raise funds for that sort of thing. Just the building of the studio. It started off with barnwood. I don't know if I see any barnwood left, but Bill Taylor and Bill Thomas put this together on a shoestring, and it's evolved from an old Alaska board with pots. You turn the knobs to a much more sophisticated system, computerized, so that you have spinetrons. So if you're putting music on, you playing Polly Wolly Doodle, it'll come up, the author will be there, all this sort of thing. This doesn't happen without your support, folks. So that's my entree, is to try and impress you that what we're trying to do right now is rather important, rather helpful, and we need to back up for it. Just something like phone interface is costly if you don't realize it, but that for certain programs is very essential. People call in from the public. We've even thought about doing that ourselves. It means you are a little bit more disrupted as far as your program is concerned, but it's wonderful to get the feedback. Dave, you're a WEFT that's been here for a long time, and you might like to add a comment there, because we do need funds, and these sorts of programs don't always generate a lot of funds. We're not sure. It's a Sunday, people are at church, people are out there doing their natural history things, so we wonder who's listening. But for some people to call in and fund this is very, very important.
So let me take care of the techie end of stuff. So you say you're out there, you're listening, you're thinking, yes, I in fact would like to help to keep this station on the air. What can you do? We say, okay, you can give us a call. Absolutely true. If you don't hear people talking on the air, that means there's probably somebody at the station who can take your pledge. And the phone number here is 217-359-9338. You may notice that right now we are talking on the air. That means this would not be an especially good time for you to call us, because every single person in the station right now is involved and are being on the air. So this would be a bad time to try and call and make your pledge. Thankfully, we actually are in the computer age and the internet era, and so you can actually go to our website, WEFT.org. Right there, you can bet your bottom dollar that right there at the very top where you can see it and you cannot miss it, it says donate now. We would love for you to go to our website and make your contribution that way. It is fairly painless. In fact, I think it's actually faster to make a donation on the website than if you were to call the station, and it will take 3 to 5 minutes for us to take down all of your information. It would be actually faster for you to go to WEFT.org. And I would like to follow on with something that you folks have already have touched on. I want to contrast. If you have cable in this area, some of your money then is going to the Urbana station that we're talking about, if you live in Urbana at any rate. That means you're actually funding the community access that we have on the internet by way of the cable company here. Our community radio station and public radio stations don't work that way. You don't have to actually contribute to their financial well-being and their being in the community. So this is why several times a year we come to you and we say, would you please directly fund us so that we can stay here? Rather than it automatically coming out of what you're already paying in the case of the cable bill, here we just ask you to actually call us, or in this case go to our website, WEFT.org, make your contribution there, and you will be helping to keep WEFT in general and the Prairie Monk in particular on the air. So if you appreciate that we're here and that the station is here, we really do need to hear from you. Again, if we are not actually talking on the air, you're certainly welcome to give us a call here, 217-359-9338. But anytime, day or night, whether we're even on the air or not, you can go to our website, WEFT.org, and make your donation there.
And if you need to find Heartland Pathways, we have been giving out URLs, which are a little hard to remember. So it's simple for you to go to your computer, go to Google, and ask for YouTube. Some of you are not used to going to YouTube or Facebook, but you can find us in both places, and you can find us under YouTube/Prairie Monk, one word. And if you don't get it that way, you can go to YouTube and then search for Prairie Monk, and it comes up. And one of the advantages of this sort of material is that we can also give you a DVD. I think that's right. And so some of you are used to watching television, and you have a DVD access, but you may not be totally computer literate like we are not ourselves. So we can give you a DVD that will help you understand what we're doing. And it may be that we can condense 2 or 3 programs onto one DVD, I don't know.
Yeah. Yes.
So we thank you very much. Are there other things that you might like to add? We're doing this as an experiment with WEFT. Are there other sort of WEFT programs that you might find interesting to record? We happen to have a topic that has visuals to go with it.
Yeah, so currently we're not filming any other WEFT program, but that is something that we're interested in doing, getting more community volunteers from UPTV over here to where they'll film different WEFT programs, and then outside of it obviously being available on WEFT, we would also have it available later in the week on UPTV.
Okay, well, we have a sequence of programs. The first one was just mainly to let people know about Heartland Pathways and what the potential is. So the first program we had was a sound program only with Kevin Elliott and Sandra Outen, and it was about the Katy Trail. So I was just asking if we could perhaps take that sound track and add to it visuals. And I have been on the Katy Trail myself, and have a booklet with Katy graphics in it. So we would have to scan them, because this was in the era when you had negatives and photographs. So it may be that we can go back to programs that we think are significant, that help you to understand what the potential is of 33-mile railroad line, which is connected to 24-mile railroad line to Danville, and back road access to Decatur. So you're looking for connections across the country that are north, south, east, and west. And so the Katy Trail is between the St. Louis and Kansas City. When we started off with Heartland Pathways, we thought we were going to go to Peoria and connect with the Rock Island line, which is a trail, up to the Hennepin Canal, and then on to other trails that would take us into Chicago. Now, that's 56 miles. Didn't happen because we weren't prepared enough to tell the public what we were doing. It was a new era. It was a new move by the federal government to preserve railroad beds by making them into trails. It was called interim trail use, and that agreement allowed railroads to come back in. It saved the bridges, and it quieted the titles so no one could invade. And so we started off years before that implementation of that federal program. But it's the same principle. We were thinking that the rail trail could be interpreting what people think is a rather flat Midwest, which isn't really that flat, but that's the impression, an uninteresting Midwest, and they like to go to the Sierra Nevadas or to other places that are more exciting. So we have to think about how we can interpret this in little pieces, and where it came from Decatur to Peoria. We were doing battle with meetings with lots of farmers and people who are adjacent, and there's always the fear that a trail will let people steal, and it's called the rape and mayhem syndrome, that if you're close to the trail, you will be hurt. Not so. It's exactly different. Many of the people who are adjacent eventually become the major supporters because they like the idea. They watch the little towns increase in value with bed and breakfasts or bicycle shops or just general upgrade. People coming through being interested, asking about the history. Do you have a Carnegie Library, for instance? Where is it? Can we have a look? And what old buildings do you have? Can we go to the cemetery and find out who you are? Did you come from Kentucky? If you came up the river from Kentucky, where did you get to in Kentucky in the first place? Where, do your barns do this? Do your barns do that? Are the boards vertical? Are the boards sideways? Just little things that people don't think to. They walk past every day. So we're not only interpreting to visitors, we're interpreting to ourselves. And that's what these sorts of programs help do. And do you have any dramatic demonstration of what I'm talking about, where your programs have changed something in a dramatic style?
I can't think of anything specifically where it's changed stuff in dramatic style, but certainly we have a lot of civic actions and community action groups. The Champaign-Urbana Citizens for Peace and Justice have been hosting forums on the possibility, the expansion of the Champaign County Jail. So they've been educating the community like that. Obviously, the anti-war, anti-racism effort's been producing a weekly show for over 4 years now on UPTV. Some groups like that, I can't, directly correlate that to something, but it would be my hope, and I'm sure theirs, that yes, they are affecting individuals and groups with
very much the case. We don't have a Nielsen rating machine going around there checking out your with an antenna whether you're on the air or being listened to. But it's very positive. It's a little on the loose side. It's from the bottom up rather than from the top down. Although, if you want to have the regulations that allow community radio and community TV, you'd better be up the top checking it out to see that the rules of the game are not going to deny you down here. How does this lock into broadband? Do you have a way of locking into the broadband at all? Is this an unfair question?
No, not at all. So I assume you're talking about the big broadband project,
yes.
The UC2B. So being at the city building where we're located at City Hall on Vine Street, we're one of the anchor institutions. So we have fiber ran directly to our building. That in some way we will be utilizing. I will mention that we actually started utilizing our own fiber line through the city of Urbana, which the city of Urbana was kind of ahead of the game. They started laying fiber before UC2B was even thought of or the stimulus package came out or anything like that. And we had fiber ran from the city building to the school administration offices. So we broadcast the school board meetings live on UPTV the first and third Tuesdays of the month. Although they're not in the council chambers, they're at 205 North Ray Street, and we're able to do that through a fiber line that we installed through video converters. So if we look at that sort of thing, using that through fiber, we could buy different video to fiber converters and kind of broadcast from anywhere on the UC2B network if we wanted to. Outside of that, we are developing a site now, or an aspect of our urbanapublictelevision.org, to where people, a lot of times people will produce everything on their own. They have their own cameras, they have their own editing software, they do everything at their own, and at the end of the week they have to come and bring us a DVD. What we are developing on our site is where they can remotely upload that from any computer with an internet connection. And video often are very large files, so definitely the higher speed internet and the larger bandwidth that you have, which is the case with UC2B, will provide you faster upload speeds for video. So that's something else that UPTV will kind of be utilizing.
I already went to Big Bite to see what it costs for a television camera, because we could almost run our own program if we had to. It's very nice to have Rue here to photograph us, but some of this is fairly simple, and we can get it done. And I just am pleased. Just one thing like mowing. We need a topic where there's millions of acres of mowing, which for us as biologists, it's unnecessary. And so how do you change one paradigm using this sort of visual material? I could take you to 10 sites right now where we've lost the seed that we would have on the roadside, between the roadside and the railroad, because the site has been mown, and often it's been mown onto private property or onto railroad property, and just taking one topic and dealing with it is helpful.
Well, we have Jason here. We might want to let folks at the home follow up on what you've been talking about. So obviously you're available sort of the way WEFT is. WEFT is here so that anyone in the community who has an idea can come. We will work with them, teach them how the equipment works, try to find a time slot for them, and then they can be on the air and present what they're good at to the community. So obviously you're there doing the same thing with visuals. So how do people get access to what you've got?
Yeah, so they can actually become a member of Urbana Public Television and get access to our camera equipment, to where they can check camera equipment and audio equipment out and go film on location and then bring that footage back. And we have editing suites with computer software that'll allow them to edit, and we teach all aspects of video production. We also have a small studio off to the side of the city council chambers, so if they want to come in and just film in our studios, they can do that as well, and staff and volunteers will help them do that. That is currently a free service provided by the city of Urbana, so it doesn't necessarily cost anything to become a member, and they can sign up online at urbanapublictelevision.org.
And again, the reason that it's free is why?
Well, the reason, there's a longer story to this, but
Okay.
the reason that it is free is just, the city of Urbana believes in, community access, not necessarily through television, but just getting citizens involved with their local government. This is another way to do that. Obviously, we don't have a lot of people commenting on local government, but sometimes it will come across their shows. But we just feel it's important to get the community involved.
I assume part of it is also because you actually do get funding.
We do.
So you can pass the savings on to the people who can come in and check things out.
Correct, yeah. So we're funded through, if people were to happen to have Comcast and have cable television service in Urbana, the city does get a small portion of that through the franchise agreement with Comcast.
So to bring that back around again, because we're fundraising here at WEFT, so just as you're helping to fund this great access through UPTV, if you have cable, you can help to keep WEFT here if you make a contribution to the station. We haven't actually mentioned the amounts that we ask people to contribute. The basic membership level at WEFT is $40. At that level, you'll get a T-shirt, a cap, or a tote bag, or a messenger bag for a mere $40. If you'd like more than one of those, we have higher levels than that. $75 gets you 2 items, $120 lets you choose 3 items. Anytime we're not talking on the air, you can call the station and we will walk you through all of the steps for making contributions. But the easiest thing to remember, again, is a basic membership level is $40 a year. That also means that you get to vote every year when we have membership elections to a couple of the seats on the board of directors. So you'll have direct input to the station by putting people on our board of directors. So all good reasons for you to contribute to WEFT. And again, that $40 a year also helps to keep the station here so that when you turn the radio on, there's something unique that you can only hear on WEFT because you're here. People from your community are what makes this station go. So again, $40 a year. Normally you can call 359-9338. Parts of the day we have people talking on the air, so you can't call then because we're on the air. But you can go to our website, WEFT.org, and make your contribution there as well. I'll also point out, if you already have your check ready to go, you can simply mail us the check, send it to WEFT, P.O. Box 1223, Champaign, Illinois, 61824.
Yes. Well, one of the questions that I had for you is, how do people learn about this? Do you have a foot in teaching at Parkland College or in the high schools or in the university? Where does someone like Rue learn about what to do with television?
So currently how we operate is I teach an on-demand sort of course to where if someone's wanting to learn camera operation or video editing skills or how to host a show, I will teach them how to do that one-on-one type of a course. We're going to move towards a more class-structured as the demand keeps growing and I get less and less time. We are currently in the Urbana High School journalism class as well. We're working with a group of students in the journalism class as the UHS broadcasting team. So if they're in the Urbana High School journalism class, I go in there every Friday afternoon or some afternoon a week. We kind of go over some stuff. They have a small studio set up there and a small storage closet, and then we also broadcast their football games, and it's a completely student-ran thing. I go there to kind of oversee them and help, but it's 2 students on cameras,
You need that. I'm tremendously grateful
2 students doing commentary, and
yeah. David comes and helps me with, and he knows the things that I don't know, and that's very helpful. So, which reminds me to ask, do you have a bunch of people that are retirees out there who have spent their lives doing graphics and design and television that you could lock into? Is this a very young paradigm, or is it? Can you include older people who have some of those skills in their lifetime?
Really, any and all of above can come and utilize UPTV, whether they have something to contribute as far as if they do have professional experience in graphic design or video or audio or anything like that, they can come and contribute. And even younger people looking to get into it, or older people for that matter who haven't done it, but maybe they're recently retired and looking to get into something. And
yes, some of us have a retinue of pictures that some of them are archival material, and some of it's historic. I just got a call from WILL, which is part of the university, which is kind of a theoretical university, but the WILL is kind of applied too. They're going into the community and doing things. And so I got a call from WILL because we go back to when you had Kinneys. You took an Ampex tape to record on, which was about 2.5 inches wide, and then when you finished your program, if you wanted a copy of that, you had to send it to a laboratory, which then made a 16mm film out of that. So we have kinescopes that go back to a long time, and even if you don't know who the people are, sometimes the dresses, the lifestyle gives you an element of history. It might be that there's the factory, like the Pepsin factory, that was, but now is never there. How do you relate it to State Street in Monticello? That sort of thing is so tremendously helpful. Grateful for your involvement and your supervision on the top, because some of this equipment is valuable equipment and we can screw it up if we don't know what we're doing. and it also relates to computerization, which requires various levels of programming. For instance, if I want to work with some programs, they might cost $1,500 for the program, but there are small elements that you can get for free, and you know about that sort of thing, so that's helpful. We've been trying to chase a website that we lost, and that's like chasing a needle in a haystack, but it's the sort of thing that some people know how to do it, and we don't. Okay, so I think with that we'll go to Heartland Pathways. We've had 4 programs now. The first one was not recorded on video. Is Katy Trail, or using established bikeways. There's 1,700 of them now, and they're very, very popular. And you have to balance them about railroads getting them back if they want them back, and that's a controversy. But then we had a program with people who are working with the right-of-way that are artists, Chris Carl and Meredith Foster, and they have a different way of working with the landscape and interpreting it. The next program was more towards a map of where we own 33 miles and how does it relate to 24 miles to Danville and to Decatur, and how does it relate east-west if we need to do that. And then this one, we're telling you, the public, about what we're doing with visuals, and I'm going to go to Heartland Pathways again, and I'm going to go back to maps that we will insert and remind you that I was talking generally about the Midwest, which doesn't have good demonstrations of rail trails because the soil is so valuable and the rainfall is so at the right time that every inch is worth money for corn and soybeans. So we will dream you through these sites in more detail. So first of all, I'm going to go to Seymour. Seymour is about 9-10 miles out of town. It's like you go along Springfield Avenue, it turns into Route 10. It's not the easiest for bicycling because at the end of Route 10 at Clinton there's a landfill, and so a lot of the transportation that is on Route 10 is garbage trucks and very heavy duty traffic. So sometimes we check people out to go up Kirby Avenue or a road to the north that is parallel and come back into Seymour when you get there.
You brought in a CD. You're a big fan, I know, of the Duke of York, and you brought in this CD and you suggested that we could drop it in when we made a transition. Is this a transition point? Would you like to hear some Duke of York before we get on with the Heartland Pathways?
Okay, let's just do that because we're thinking of having people to parade along our railroad bed to let people know that we actually exist and that someone looks after this biodiversity which looks like weeds, and it's very, very tempting as the price of corn goes up and up and up. It's very tempting to turn that weeds into agriculture.
This is one of the great things that you can get by having community radio is we give back to the community by being aware of what's out there. And besides, for example, Dave knowing about the environment in our community, he also knows about music in the community, and as a fan of the Duke of York, he has a copy of their album. One of the local prairies that you have access to is the Pocket Prairie right across the street, as a matter of fact, from WEFT. So here's a track from the Duke of York. It's not actually about the Pocket Prairie, but it's called Pocket Pedal, and you're listening to it here on WEFT Champaign.
got a little bit tougher. 2 by 2, I'll be there for you. Anywhere I go, it gets rough and rough. Logic, I just got a little bit tougher. 2 by 2, I'll be there for you. Anywhere I go, it gets rough and rough. Logic, I just got a little bit tougher.
Thank you. It's amazing what music can do to encourage people to think about their territory. It's a little bit like having a T-shirt that says something, but sometimes you can tell a story with your music and get an atmosphere that would be very nice. So we're at Seymour, 9 miles, 10 miles out of town, and there's a short line, a grain line that goes across parallel to the road. Actually, the railroad line preceded the road, and the road came later. And sometimes the road is adjacent to the railroad. Sometimes it is a half section away, but basically it's following the railroad along. The railroad has to be fairly flat and not go up and down too many hills, whereas the road can sometimes go down the valley and up the other side and keep the road going straight in a Jeffersonian flat manner so that everything is square and you know where you're going. That road runs past Seymour. The elevators usually retain a mile of ground beyond the elevator so that they can park grain trains. And so the railroad at Seymour goes to Camp Creek. And Camp Creek, we have bought the railroad bed which connects the Seymour to Whiteheath, and then Whiteheath to the Railroad Museum, which borders 7 miles. So we eventually need to put a bridge across Camp Creek, because it was actually, when the railroad was abandoned, the bridge at Camp Creek was a very new one, but by federal mandate you are supposed to take out the bridge just because there might be some liability problem. Somebody might climb off it and commit suicide, or so the bridges are taken out, and they're very, very expensive to replace. We brought in a bridge from southeast corner of Champaign County, and unfortunately it had the end salvaged off it because it's a steel bridge, and we're not sure whether we can use that bridge, but in the long run we need to go over Camp Creek. Just on the other side of Camp Creek there's a hill. It's part of the Cerro Gordo Moraine, and there's a moisture gradient so that you have at the top dry area species and at the bottom wetland, and some of that area is quite undisturbed. If you stand and look across the railroad terrain and look at the house nearby that's been there for a long time, the terrain has not been disturbed. So there we have ceanothus, or New Jersey tea, which is a prairie shrub, and we pick seed there. And the shrub is accompanied by probably about 50 different species of prairie plants. So we're very jealous of that little place. There are some trees that have grown up, and we've had it for 30 years, and so we are aware that people are much more interested in trees than they are in prairie. Prairie really has has a connotation of weeds, because you can't really recognize the difference between weeds and a weed is a plant growing out of place. And if you were in Flatville and you were getting rid of the prairie, then you were getting rid of the weeds. So it's ingrained in this. It's only 6 or 7 generations, and we're still regarding prairie as weeds. But for those of us who are used to watching prairies, I can stand in the back of a train and look out the back door and see prairies on the railroad all the way to Chicago, and then I can stop on the way back, and if I come by bus or something like that, I can get out and walk to those places and check them out. Part of our responsibility is to teach people what is a prairie, what is rare, what is wonderful about it. To take out your lens and look at this little flower, to take out the seed and put it under a microscope. That's what we lose when we lose the prairie. And we somehow have to talk to people and say that in our case, when we're trying to preserve the biodiversity, the weeds are the farm plants or the farm weeds that sometimes are our own, because if you have a very disturbed soil, it's not unlike what you would get if you had a badger scratching a hole in the ground and fertilizing it. So you're fertilizing it with artificial fertilizer, but they're fertilizing it with their own feces. And so if you have a ragweed there, then it grows ragweed all over the farmland. So some of our own prairie species can become weedy. If you go up the hill a little bit from Camp Creek, you're going up the Saragordo Moraine, and your ears won't pop because you're getting up so high. It's just 100 feet or so, but then you can run down the other side. We have problems with that hill when we burn. The prairies have been in the middle of the country where lightning is rambunctious and shorts to the ground and causes fire every so often. And if you have settlers come in and you don't want fire, if you want a prairie, it's so used to being fired for 10,000 years that it has to be controlled burn. So we would have controlled burns on that hill, and that hill is dangerous for us because cars will come along there and you can say, please caution, but sometimes they're going at a high speed and they will even go over the wrong side of the road to go over the hill. So we have to be very, very careful when we're burning that particular prairie. But you go down the other side, and if you close your eyes, you can imagine flag lilies and purple cornflowers and grey-headed cornflowers. They're not too dramatic because they're small. They flower for a short period of time. They're mixed in with some things like blackberries, there's poison ivy. And, so this is a site where restoration is justified. You have to be fairly careful to try and make that restoration something like what it was. You can't really use it in a sense of manicuring it and planting an interesting species in one spot and hoping that will simulate what was in 1850. You have to really think back and look at the adjacent areas, and if you're lucky you'll find a small corner with something in it that will say, this is native territory. We're on the main line, and we have volunteers who have bought a bobcat and put a lot of energy into removing the trees from the railroad bed, and we hope that in the long run we'll have a trail that will run along the old interurban, and that will interface with the Railroad Museum at White Heath. That we're not certain of. Often you have to put Humpty Dumpty together again in pieces, because you do a little bit now, but buying the railroad bed is essential because it's so easy to destroy the plants that are there, and they will never be back again. So we're very jealous that we have this. Some places we have drainage ditches that need small bridges across them. We've brought in bridges to do that, but we need fairly heavy equipment to make those changes. So we too need funding to do those sorts of things. You come to the county line, and there's a change in jurisdiction, so you might have to watch to see what the change in attitude is to mowing and the like. In our case, just recently, we've had Ameren mow for us. It scares the devil out of you because they come with a mower that's a rotary mower that is really huge, and it can take down a 3-inch tree. And part of the reason for this is, and it's done about it once every 20 years, is so that the trees will not short or arc to very high-powered power lines, which are easements on our railroad bed. So a couple of weeks ago, I went out and found that Ameren had mown the territory. That probably hurts some things like shrubs and small trees, but it basically leaves the prairie intact, it leaves the soil intact, and it lets us find untoward spots where somebody's dumped 25 tires or done untoward things. And it also handles the poison ivy, which is, in our case, we can have poison ivy that has stems an inch thick, and you wouldn't recognize them as poison ivy plants because they're poison ivy trees. They like the interface between trees and prairie, and in the railroad case, you have drainage, and drainage allows trees to come in that don't like wet feet, but they like water, and so they have invaded, and the volunteers we have, Tom Scott and others, people who genuinely would like to see a trail that comes back towards Champaign. In the long run, we would like to figure that is a site where a train perhaps could come back, and that you could have recreational steam trains come back into Champaign-Urbana. We haven't got that far, and that's probably for some generation that may not have even been born yet. But if you don't have some sort of long-range perspective, you won't have that happen. At Whiteheath, we have an older community on top of the moraine again, the Saragota moraine, and we have the railroad bed, which goes 23 miles to Clinton in one direction and goes down through the Railroad Museum to Monticello and out towards Cisco and Decatur in the other direction. We would like to, at some stage, focus in on that triangle, because triangles are known as Ys, and they're where you can change a train around. You can send trains in different directions, but you can also send them around the various sides of the triangle, and they will be able to, the engine will stay in front. It's not always used for that. The 7 miles that the Railroad Museum owns is 3 miles is used fairly often, but 7 miles is a little bit much to manage and needs repair of the track, and the equipment has to be good to go up there. There's one of the bends on this triangle is so steep that it's one of the steepest bends in Illinois, and as you take a rail car around it, you can hear the wheels screaming because they're hitting on the side of the track. So just little things like that are interesting, and somehow we hope to go through the Railroad Museum territory. They actually have 2 lines. One is an old interurban line, and one is the main line. They used to run their train on the interurban, but then the main line closed out, and so they bought their 7 miles, which takes people into Monticello. And Monticello, in its wisdom, bought the interurban, and they run a trail into Monticello. In the long run, we hope that we'll have a trail that will come through from Monticello through to Whiteheath and into Seymour. On the other way, we hope that we will go across a trail at Monticello, which is known as the Sangamon River Bridge Trail, and it takes people across the bottomlands of Trestle and towards Allerton Park. So these are resources that we'll talk about and augment, and we hope that some of you will at least go to YouTube and pull up the Prairie Monk and see what we're trying to interpret to you and to a broader population. This is about the end of the time we have, so Dave might want to say something more about fundraising, because what we've been doing and talking about today very much depends on your fund support.
Sure. So again, you can go to your phone and call us at 359-9338 to make a pledge. You can go online to WEFT.org and make your pledge online, or you can simply mail us a check at WEFT P.O. Box 1223, Champaign, Illinois 61824. And as always, all the views and opinions expressed are solely those of the speakers. WEFT does not take an editorial stance. It is now noon. You're tuned to WEFT Champaign 90.1 FM. We are community radio for East Central Illinois. This would be a great time for you to give us a call. Now there are lots of people who are going to stop talking on the air, and we'll be happy to take your pledge if you were to call us now at 359-9338. And it's now time for Shruti, Music of India.